Okay, so we keep carrying on the left angle or the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix with the 4-6 profile. Let's go to the 4-6. And when we get to the beginning of why the 4 has influence, so much have been seen in the archetype of the 34 gate because it's powerful integration. So we have the line of triumph. And remember, it's a blue lead. So in this, it's a lifelong process. You don't get to this right away. The freedom in absolute victory, but it's first, you have to have victory. I explained that in a moment. The freedom in absolute victory to unlimited use of power. Now, that's quite a blessing. But there's a criterion here, and the criterion is absolute victory. So, what is this victory? The victory is learning how to restrain excessive power. If you learn how to restrain excessive power, then you're going to be able to use power efficiently without limitation. But you have to find a way to control this power. In this context, it leads to confidence to use power subtly of lack of confidence, which of course is going to lead to misuse of the power. But the thing to see about the 4 is that the 4, because it has built in this mildness after all, the 4 is the theme of brotherhood, sisterhood. It's a theme of general friendship. It's a theme of the interlocutor between the lower trigram and the upper trigram. It's a networking agent. It's the foundation of what becomes juxtaposition and this great bridging of the two sides. So the things to see about the 4 is that there begins the understanding that the use of power is always determined by who you're using the power with or to. In other words, is the power being seen as it affects its outside? Now that's totally different. The moment that you begin to see how power impacts the other, you then can very easily learn how to suddenly change the mythology. And when you learn to see how power influences the other, then you can gain confidence in the use of your power. Again, this tells so much about the nature of the fourth line. What it's really saying is that this is the ability that is ascribed to the fourth line building and investing in a network. All of this is about the proper use of power. If you're investing in a network and you put too much concentration over there and start to ignore over there, and you're going to lose the potential advantage and the opportunities that were over there. And so you begin to see that you need to be able to discriminate. You need to be able to be very subtle in the technique and how to use the energy to maintain a broader network. But 4-6s are 4-6s. You got a 6-line profile. You're going to go through deep transition in the life. And again, the dilemma, the 4-3 phase. If you're aligned with the wrong fractal community, if you're aligned with the wrong geometries, then the way you learn to use your power has nothing to do with the way you need to learn to use the power. It's like getting hooked up with a bunch of people who are the archetype of peace and love, and you end up smoking marijuana and going to Love Fest. Those things don't exist anymore. Well, marijuana does, but nonetheless, Love Fest are out. But anyway, that kind of thing where all of a sudden you're aligned with these kinds of beings and the display of power is something that has to be minimized to a level where it's almost innocuous. It has to become something totally different. And any rise of that power to anything that would display any kind of brute force would immediately receive ejection. And yet that being may not be belong in that crowd at all. What will happen to them is that, like a sacral dysfunction, slowly but surely the energy system doesn't work correctly. The other side of the coin is you end up with a very rough crowd. And in a very rough crowd, it's very easy for the 34 to use power in a very physical, dynamic, and violent way. And again, that may not be, but the consequences for both. In other words, again, this goes back to if you got a child that has a fourth line in the profile. If they're 4-6 particularly, then you have to pay a great deal of attention to who their friends are when they're young and to be able to see very clearly that for them to guide them on one way or the other, if they're a generator, it's not about you wanting to belong to that group. That's not the way for you, but that does that group belong to you? If the group wants you and they call you out and you go to naturally to that, then it's okay. In other words, those early friendships are going to be very important with the sleeping phoenix. They're essential because otherwise you go through a whole cycle which the possibility to learn how to use your energy efficiency really is lost, not the physical cost. When I talk about going subjectively to objectively from pessimism to optimism, it's the movement of the first cycle from them being on the roof. You have to see that's chemical. My description is an adjective of a chemical process. And you have to see that if you're operating with a 34 gate as your team and you're 4-3 and you're with the right beings in the chemistry that you're producing is different. And that very chemistry in the chemistry that brings out the quality of the pessimism. We know that we take drugs to change our mood. How easy it is. We got all kinds of receptors in the brain for endorphins that will immediately give us a chemistry that makes us feel good. And you have to see that the chemistry that makes you pessimistic, the chemistry that gives you this terror feeling, that's all it is. It's a chemistry. So one of the biggest thing about trying to awaken the personality is to remind you that the vehicle operates as a chemical thing. that the experiments of this or that, the up and down, the good mood and the bad mood, the upset and the not upset, and the melancholy and the not, it's all just chemistry, nothing more, nothing less. But that chemistry, the whole thing about operating correctly through your strategy and your authority is that you align, you balance this chemistry, and you don't distort it so that you're moving towards the pessimistic or more towards the other side. So thank you very much, Ra. Great job. I love you.